Hello, welcome to the Live at 5, which today I've called From Concept to Completion. And it's all about getting things done, because I know that there's many of you out there who are longing to move in new directions, but actually it's quite hard to do. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So welcome. And if you don't know me, I'm Josephine Hughes, and I help therapists to build a thriving private practice. So today, all about getting things done. And my calendar today is just brilliant. I didn't look at the calendar and think I will do a talk about getting things done. But when I looked at my calendar, this is what it said, and it fits in so nicely. I thought I have to tell you. So I'm just looking down because I've got my notes down here. Have enough courage to start and enough heart to finish. So I'll say that again. Have enough courage to start and have enough heart to finish. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about why I think that's really helpful. And the first thing to say is I think it takes a lot of courage to actually start on a new project. Now, I can see there's some of you watching, so do pop into the comments. Have you got something that you'd really like to do? So it might be that you're thinking about setting up in private practice, or it might be that you've set up in private practice and you'd like to create a website, and that's a new thing for you. Or possibly, you're thinking about doing something completely different. You're thinking about launching an online course or doing a retreat for therapists or something else. Something that you've got to get going on, but you're finding it difficult to get started. So let me know in the comments if you've got anything like that coming up. It might be building a shed in your garden for your private practice. It could be anything. Let me know. But I think the thing is it does take courage to get started, because when we set out on a new project, we're actually making ourselves vulnerable. And especially if we've been brought up to believe that we mustn't fail. And often that comes from critical voices that we heard when we were growing up. Failure was seen as something bad. And that means that we can be very anxious about doing new things. So the thought of doing something new can make us feel really vulnerable. And here's a really great example that someone's just popped into the feed. They're looking at writing their contracts for private practice. And the thing about that is, there's all these fears that come along with it. And it's about the fear of getting it wrong, isn't it? And you could think, well, what if I get it wrong? And you can get really stuck because you're worried about getting it wrong. And that makes you vulnerable. You're vulnerable to criticism. You're vulnerable to complaints. You're vulnerable to yourself. You're vulnerable to that part of yourself that thinks you should get everything right, telling you off because you've got something wrong. So it does take courage to get started. And also, I think the other way in which it takes courage to get started is you don't know that you're going to actually be able to complete the project. You might be doubting your skills. It also takes courage because it may be you can't do it all by yourself, and that means you've got to ask for help. And for many of us, if we've been, beaten back whenever we've asked for help growing up, if we were brought up, that somehow it was naughty or unhelpful or, bad in some way to ask for help, then we can feel really vulnerable to ask for help to get our project done. And often as well, we don't know what it takes to complete our project. And sometimes that does involve, reaching out to people. And that can feel quite vulnerable as well, because you think, well, I should know. Yeah. Here we go. And here's another example of someone who's doing something new, reworking my website and redoing it entirely, if I'm honest. It's not new, but it feels like it. I'm not fully behind the original. And I think that can be part of it as well, as it can feel really big. It can feel like a really big thing to do, especially if it's, re-editing something. And, you look at what is existing already and you think, oh, how can I make it better? So let's just sort of think a little bit more about that, because ultimately thinking about that quote that I've just said, which was have enough heart to finish, it can really, really help if you can really plug into your heart and what your heart wants. And I think that most of you who watch me want to have this practice where you're helping people, where you have freedom because you're running your own practice, where you can do things and see clients in the time that you've got available, where you can work it around your other commitments, and where ultimately you can have the business that really suits you, where you are really making a difference to people's lives. And if you can hold on to that, sometimes you have enough heart to be able to finish the project. So let's just have a quick think now about I'm just going to do some sort of like bullet points to keep the talk short. But the other day I was started on my new course that I've got, and this is one that I am learning on. So it's all about public speaking. And the first thing that Kate, who is the teacher, talked about was clarity. And she said, how often when we're thinking about doing a talk, we get our PowerPoint out and we just fill in a whole load of bullet points on PowerPoint, and that then becomes the talk. And what we haven't done is got any clarity on what we're actually doing. And this is the thing that I find really difficult, because if I've got a plan in mind, I just want to get on with it. I don't want to spend the time thinking it through beforehand. I just want to do it. But that often means that I go into a project without much clarity about what it's about. And the reason I don't like doing it is because it hurts my brain. But it does help to give you some guidance. And if you've got that clarity and you know where you're going in terms of what you want to achieve at the end, that can really, really help you. So, for example, for someone who's looking at their website, for example, it's really helpful to work out, who is my website for? And that is, like a really big question, isn't it? And we can dive into websites without really thinking through that pivotal question of, actually, who am I trying to reach? And it's so important to think about that, because it makes it so much more focused. It makes your website so much clearer if you know who you're going to try and reach. And for that, do ask me for more help through Therapy Growth Group, which is my membership group, where I have all this information for you so you can work out who it is you're trying to reach. So it's really helpful to have these clear goals and objectives and to know the answers to some of these questions, the who, the what, the why, the when, the where. All those sorts of W questions can be really helpful for gaining clarity. And then once you've got that in place, you can start breaking your project down into steps. And sometimes, you could do a broader outline of a step without necessarily knowing all the steps that you need to take. So, for example, I'm doing my podcast at the moment, and I'm doing it alongside my daughter, who's my editor. And what I realised I needed to do for her was a timetable of which episodes needed to be ready and when, so that we can get some of those episodes ready to get them out at the end of February. Which reminds me, you're not going to remember this, but I will put it in the I'm going to put this in the comments. I don't think I can do it directly from here. Let me see if I can post a comment. So I might be able to put this in the comments. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, that has actually worked. So I shall take this silly banner off the screen, because you won't remember it anyway. This is where you can sign up to get notifications when the podcast goes live. That's what that's all about. And I realised to get it to go live, we do need to have some episodes ready. We don't need to have them all ready though. So I gave my daughter some dates today. And that's only sort of like, I've only realised today that she actually needs these specific episodes. But I had an outline plan that, we would be doing the episodes in February. So it becomes clearer as you go along. That's what I'm trying to say. So what is just extraordinary for me is I actually have created a spreadsheet for this, and spreadsheets can be a really great friend for you, in that you can just put all the tasks down one side, and then do a whole lot of columns where you tick off the various tasks that you've got to do. And I am not a spreadsheet person, but even I have found a spreadsheet to be useful. So create a timeline using a spreadsheet. The other thing you can do as you're working through it is to make space to do it. And I cannot emphasize this enough. I was talking to someone last week who was thinking about joining Therapy Growth Group. She said, I really want to work on my marketing. And I said, well, when are you going to fit it in? And that was sort of like, actually, that's probably the best bit of coaching I did all week, because it's really about, if you've got a project you want to do, you need to prioritize it. And sometimes you can't just shovel it in because there isn't any spare time. You have to decide what has to go to be able to fit this project in. And I hate that. I absolutely hate that about projects. But you do have to decide, and you do have to say no to some of the other things that you want to get done so that you can say yes to this particular project. I am working really efficiently at the moment because I want to do so many projects and I want to fit them all in. So I'm having to be really, really clear about my projects, really clear about my timelines, and they are getting done, which is hooray, yippee. So it can be really helpful. Get rid of anything you don't need to do. Really have focus on that project. And in a sense, that becomes, this is what I do, every day when I sit down to work, I'm going to do something on this project, or I have a specific time during the week. And this is what we do in Therapy Growth Group. We have a Wednesday morning where people can come on and they get an hour and a half. If nothing else, they can have an hour and a half a week where they're working on their marketing. And that works really well. Accountability to other people, body doubling, as they call it, where you get in a room and work alongside people, can be absolutely fantastic for your concentration. So, it's helpful as well, to keep going back to your plan, to keep reviewing, to be aware that sometimes things take longer than you expect, and to adapt accordingly. I'm sure you know all of that. So, as a little summary, as we reach the end of the talk, it takes courage to start, but find the heart to finish it. So dig down into your why. Why do you want to do this? What are you going to get rid of in order to get this done, to avoid the distractions? Really try and define the project, set your goals and objectives, break it down, create a timeline, keep reviewing it, and avoid and eliminate those distractions, because they can really get in the way. So I hope this little talk has helped you in getting some things done.